This is WEFT Champaign, 90.1 FM, community radio for East Central Illinois, streaming live at www.weft.org. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Weekend Heartbeat, a series of shows that represent a collective effort to bring the thoughts and actions of people working in the nonprofit arena to the forefront, where it needs to be. Join us each Saturday at this time to enjoy a different episode in this series. On the first Saturday of each month, you can hear Peace Talks Radio with Joy George. On the second Saturday, A New Lamp with Marilyn Rickey and Sean David. On the third Saturday, WFT Vision 2020 with Sandra Otten. And on the fourth Saturday, you can hear Radio Eco Shock with Doug Olive. The views and opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent those of WFT, its board of directors, associates, its station manager, or Prairie Air Incorporated. The following program was pre-recorded and consists of two parts. The first part was recorded in 2011. The second part was recorded in November 2014. Welcome to Weekend Heartbeat. I'm Sean David, and this is A New Lamp.
New lamp for old. New lamp for old. Remember how Aladdin headed out to get oil for his mother's old dented, tarnished lamp? And in the market he met a magician calling out these words. This strange man was offering to give him a brand new shiny lamp for his old one. That's what I want to offer you, if you'll have it. A new lamp of spiritual guidance. But maybe you already have such a lamp, which still burns brightly. Great. You are still welcome to join us simply to learn who we are. But maybe your lamp of divine guidance has gotten dented and tarnished like Aladdin's. Or perhaps you have no such lamp at all. To you, I offer a new lamp. Hi, my name is Marilyn. Welcome to A New Lamp, a program designed to make you acquainted with the Baha'i religious faith. I hope you will choose to spend the next few minutes with me. Thanks.
God is one, man is one, and all
Well, hi. Thanks for tuning in again today. Last week was the first program of A New Lamp. We touched briefly on a few preliminary matters, such as the Baha'i faith being an independent world religion, the names of God, and the meaning of manifestation of God. Let's get a little more involved today. For starts, a brief history. The faith was first known as the Babi movement. On May 23, 1844, a young man in Shiraz, Persia, which is now Iran, claimed to be the Qayyim of Shia Islam. He referred to himself as the Bab, that's B-A-B, which means gate, the gate between the old prophetic cycle to the age of fulfillment. Like John the Baptist, he claimed to be the forerunner to him whom God will make manifest, whom he said would be far greater than himself. He quickly had many followers. Persia at that time was in an appallingly decadent state, both secularly and religiously. Many people, particularly religious students and their teachers, were looking actively for the one their Shia traditions taught them to expect. This seemed, of course, a serious threat to religious and government leaders alike. The Bab was imprisoned, and thousands of his followers were barbarically massacred. The Bab was executed by a firing squad. The early years of the faith read like a fictional tragedy, and I'll tell you more about it another day. Among the Bab's followers was a man named Hussein Ali, whom we now know as Baha'u'llah. He was chained, shackled, and put in a filthy dungeon. After being released, he was exiled to Baghdad, then Constantinople, now Istanbul, and eventually imprisoned in a Turkish barracks in Akka, in what was then Palestine, and is now Israel. He was a prisoner the rest of his life. He claimed to be the one the Bab referred to as he whom God shall make manifest. To tell you about him will take more time than we have today, but I am very anxious to do so. After his death, the leadership of the faith fell to his eldest son, Abdul-Baha, then to his great-grandson, Shoghi Effendi. The world center for the faith is in Haifa, Israel, on the side of Mount Carmel. There are now over 5 million Baha'is throughout the world. There is no clergy, but elected spiritual assemblies oversee the faith in local, national, and international communities. We've not yet talked about the basic principles. It's time. Baha'is are dedicated to belief in one God and unity of all peoples and religions, progressive revelation, elimination of prejudices of all form, elimination of extremes of wealth and poverty, equality of men and women, universal education for both sexes, individual search for truth, harmony of science and religion, a universal supplemental language, establishment of world peace upheld by a world commonwealth of nations. These are the basic core principles we will delve into over the weeks to come. They may seem obvious to us in the U.S. in 2011, but not in mid-19th century Persia, nor even in many countries today. Way out. Next week, let's consider the principle of progressive revelation. I think you'll find it interesting.
In a bombed-out room in Belfast, a young boy is crying. He's alone, and he don't understand how the teachings of one book build on love and understanding could cause the hurt and killing in his land. In an old part of Jerusalem, two children are playing. They run and laugh the way that it should be. But one will wear the star, and one will wear the crescent. Their road will change from friends to enemies, but we are one. The flowers of one garden were one, the leaves of one tree. Let the walls come down and stand here together. We are one family. In a Pakistani village, a young boy on crutches takes a fall and lies helplessly there. And he holds out his hand, but no one will take it. They won't touch him or the clothes that he wears. On a side street in Selma, a black child is sitting in a squad car, protected from the whites. 'Cause they're burning a cross to send her a message, and you can see the fear in her eyes, that we are one. The flowers of one garden, let the walls come down and stand here together. We are one family. Ponder in our hearts how we were all created from the same dust, same dust. Searching we will find Spirit of the age has come to find us, to find us. We are one. Flowers of one garden, we're one. Leaves of one tree. Let the walls come down and stand here together. We are one family. We Let the walls come down, stand here together. We are one family.
The purpose of religion, as revealed from the heaven of God's will, is to establish unity and concord amongst the peoples of the world. Make it not the cause of dissension and strife. The religion of God and His divine law are the most potent instruments and the surest of all means for dawning of the light of unity amongst men. Baha'u'llah. Thanks so much for being with me this morning. I hope you have found a blessing during these few minutes. If you want to learn more about the Baha'i religion, you can go online to www.bahai.us. To contact me, my email address is anewlamp@yahoo.com. Thanks, and have a great day. Welcome to the second program of A New Lamp. We are so glad to have today as our first guest Dottie Fry, a Baha'i from the local Baha'i communities. Welcome, Dottie.
Thank you, Marilyn. I'm glad to be here.
Hi, Dottie.
Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Oh, this is exciting. This is our second program, and you're our very first guest.
Well,
And-
thank
and
you for inviting me.
We're so glad to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
Well, I live in Savoy. I'm formerly an archivist at Michigan State University and retired in 2001 to come here to be near my children and my grandchildren. Actually, I'm originally from Illinois, from Decatur. I was born there, and I lived there until I was about 11, and then I lived in St. Louis. My husband and I met at Columbia, Missouri, when I was in college at University of Missouri, and I have very strong ties with Illinois, although we have been many, many places. My husband was a journalist, and so we traveled quite a bit through the years.
Isn't it funny? We don't know where life is going to take us.
That's right.
Kind of whither the wind blows.
That's right.
And your children. Tell us about your children.
Oh, my children. David is retired from University of Illinois from the computer department, and my daughter Janie is a cell biologist. She is also retired, worked at the university. And then our third child, our daughter Karen, lives in Houston. She has a degree in library science and business administration, so she's always worked with oil companies and works in records management, electronic records management.
So what interested you in being an archivist? How did that come about?
Oh, well, that takes me to one of my special journeys, I guess. My husband and I went to Israel in 1977 to serve at the Baha'i International Center. He was the editor of the International Baha'i News Service at that time, and I worked in the research department.
And you have continued your interest in that in a smaller scale in the local community.
Yes,
You are the librarian
librarian and
and archivist.
for the Baha'i Center in Urbana. When I came back from Israel, we were there about 3 years, and when I came back, it was so I could go back to school and study archive science as a career.
Really? So you've been a Baha'i quite a while.
Since 1962.
Since you've been here, have you been in this area since the 60s?
No.
Dottie? No. Oh, you were
Oh, no, I've been many, many places.
many, many places. I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious what Baha'is are doing in other places that you recall toward building peace in our.
Well, I can
our
tell
world.
you one thing, because we used to live in South Carolina, and we went there specifically to teach the faith. But we were only there 4 years, and that was in the late 1960s. The Baha'i faith now is the largest minority religion in South Carolina.
Really?
Yes. It's if you look it up on the internet, it'll show you a map of the largest minorities in every state where different religions are. Of course, Christianity is the most wide in terms of membership. It has the largest membership.
Sure,
in the country.
throughout the country.
And there are sections where there are large numbers of Buddhists or Muslims or so forth. And but South Carolina is where there are the most Baha'is, and that's for a reason, because the faith was taught and welcomed there in large numbers in the early 70s, and has continued to grow. And I know many people, I have many friends there. It's a delightful place. And of course, one of the things, this oneness of mankind, the elimination of prejudice, that's not going to happen until we sit down and talk with a person of another race.
That's right.
Unless we have dinner with them, unless we become friends and get to know their life, it may take a very, very long time to break down the barriers, which are formidable. I've just finished reading a book called Come to the Table, which is about, it was written by a black woman and a white man, and it was their purpose was to do research on the reconciliation of the descendants of slaveholders and the descendants of the slaves. It's a remarkable book and a remarkable organization that's come to the table. You can actually look it up on the internet. They have seminars and so forth. And I've read quite a bit on the subject of race unity and white privilege, and this this growing need and desire to become more acquainted with one another and try to eliminate those fears. And it's really fear-based. The divisions are fear-based.
Sure.
And if you do much reading on this subject, and if you spend time with people of other races until they trust you and there's trust between you, then you begin to learn where they're coming from. And things that you might say, not think a thing about, is an insult to that culture, whatever it is. But you have to get to know them individually. You have to get to know the culture.
Well, when you were in South Carolina, you see that was late 60s, early 70s.
That's right.
And the people were receptive to the Baha'i faith. At that time, in the culture generally, assuming that there was still a lot of stress between the two races.
Yes, there was.
Were both races equally receptive to the idea of the faith?
Not at all. Not at all.
I
No,
figured.
that's an easy answer.
Easy answer.
But they were very kind to us, and we made friends there. When we went on the project, it was 3 families, 2 African American families and 1 white family, and basically we just made friends and tried to do what we could to bring about friendships and so forth. It was a wonderful time of our life. It was hard on our children, because once it was known that the Baha'is believed in social integration, they were ostracized.
Oh, really?
Oh, very badly, yeah. It was very hard for them to get through that period. The schools, it happened at the same time, our coming there was at the same time the schools had just been integrated. And the library where I worked had just been integrated. And many of the white families immediately took their children out of school and put them in a private school. They're in that town. So that right there became a division.
Right. Instead of uniting, it divided.
Right, right. One of our friends who had moved down there, another Baha'i lady, was a school teacher, African American, taught English and French, and is very much loved in that town. She stayed there all through these years. She's been there since, I think, 1967, 68. Yeah, 1968. Her name is Elizabeth Martin. And Elizabeth eventually became principal of the grade school there. And at the time when we went there, that was unheard of. They had separated schools, and so when they came together, finally, with an integrated staff, that took a while, and she became principal. and she's still there. She bakes cookies for everybody in town. She says, I just love them so much, I'm just going to kill them with cookies, I guess. I'll just kill them with kindness, and
that's neat.
maybe they will, you know, maybe they will love me.
Well, since that time, you no longer live there yourself, but you are in touch with people from
Right.
there. Has there been an improvement in the
Oh my.
situation?
It's a totally different thing. It's totally different. You would never see a black person and a white person, young people, walking down the street together like a boy and a girl.
Yes.
You would never see that. That changed, of course, you know, as children got to know each other and so forth. In fact, I went back some years ago. Elizabeth had her 80th birthday, and I went back with my family and we visited. While I was there, I visited a lady who had become friends with me, but once we began to teach openly and invite black people to our home, that all changed. And that was very typical. People would draw away from you
Yes.
if they saw that the black people were not in your kitchen cooking for you. They were actually sitting down in your living room having tea. You know, it was, even though they were very close, they didn't even realize how close they were as friends
Yes.
when they worked together like that. But anyway, I visited this friend, and she said, "Oh, I want to tell you how sorry I am." And I said, "Well, what for?" And she said, "Well, the way that I abandoned you." She said, I should have stood by you." She became very liberal and was a columnist in the newspaper, and was just a defender of race unity, you know, by this time. And she said, I said, "Well, I didn't do anything." And she said, "What, because of what you did, I should have been more supportive." And I said, "Well, what did I do?" She said, "You integrated the social life of Winsboro, South Carolina."
Really?
And I had no idea that was that clear to anyone, you know, else. I suppose it was true. It was true, but it wasn't intentional. We were just living like we always have, which is making our homes open to people of all races and all religions and all nationalities and so forth. We had always done that as Baha'is, and our children had been taught that that's the right way
Sure.
to live. So I felt very, very grateful that I had heard that from her. After we left, one of our dearest friends, who was one of the leaders of the white community, she and her husband, she began to have integrated meetings at her home. Now, these are not Baha'i meetings. These are like the library board or the historical society. She would have those at her home and invite people of other races, and it was quite interesting. Our first integrated meeting there was when we had a visitor from Mauritius. That's an island near India.
I'm glad you explained that.
And
I've never heard of it
Mauritius,
before.
Puva Murde was his name, and we had a youth conference and his visit there all that weekend. And we have a picture of this whole group of people, Baha'is who had come from Georgia and from Mississippi and so forth. They were in our front yard, and we took the picture. Well, when that happened, it sort of turned the town upside down.
Oh my.
The people would drive by our house, just staring at our house.
You were notorious.
We were notorious. So I wrote an article for the newspaper and explained, you know, I didn't explain. I just wrote an article like, this is what happened this weekend. We had a wonderful, you know, the youth from all these places came and had a conference and so forth, and the guest was Mr. Puva Murde from Mauritius and so forth. And I was called into my to meet with the president of the library board. I worked for the library board, And he said, I understand that you had black people in your home. Now, can you imagine this now? In 2014, this was 1970, I guess, 69, something like that. And I said, well, yes, that's true. They're friends of mine. They're members of my religion. And he said, well, I don't know about this. And I said, well, you know, Christ taught us that we should all be brothers and sisters. And I said, I told you when I took this job that I was a Baha'i and that we believed in the oneness of mankind and that I had no problem with the integration of the library.
Yes.
And we went on and talked for a while. And when it was over, he just sat there he was quiet for a while. And then he took my hand and shook it, and he said, well, I just want to say I'm very proud of you.
Oh,
Wow.
isn't that wonderful?
And you don't have to worry about your job. I think he was going to fire me. So, and we had so many miracles and wonderful experiences down there, and met so many wonderful people, warm, loving, caring, brave, courageous. It was a wonderful time of our life.
Wow.
I'll never forget it.
One thing that I'm kind of curious about, because you haven't mentioned anything about it, and I wonder if you could speak to it a bit, is that, I mean, you went down there and you kind of knew you were going against the grain by by making all of these changes, but it doesn't sound like you went in there saber rattling and causing trouble, and so I'm kind of wondering why didn't you do that?
Well, that's totally contrary to the Baha'i teachings. We're soldiers of love. Our weapons are cookies.
I like that.
Well,
Our weapons are cookies.
Yeah, we.
Well, can I cut in 1 second? I'd like to rephrase that question that I asked. But I asked the question poorly. I said saber rattling, and what I really meant marching and protesting and carrying signs and having rallies and yelling in people's faces. And I'm just kind of curious about that. That when I think of civil rights, when I think of integrating black and white, that's what comes to my mind. So I'm wondering, what you're describing sounds like something very different. Wondering if you talk about that.
Well, the only time I can think of Baha'is marching would be that they would join the Martin Luther King parade that goes on annually. They would be represented. They would have a float in a 4th of July parade, maybe, saying the Baha'i faith, oneness of mankind. That's the only kind. Baha'is are not about protesting like that. This is a part of society that's very political, and Baha'is are not political. We obey the laws of our country. We don't, although we vote in elections, we don't electioneer for any particular person. It's really quite contrary to our faith to influence the vote of any other person. So you can imagine right now, with the elections going on, my phone is turned off.
My response lately has just been, I'm not political, thank you.
Yeah, I have to say that, and no, the changes that will take place are going to take place on 2 levels. This is my own opinion, that you will have these movements, these protests and so forth, and it's a part of the breaking down of the old world order. And what Baha'is are doing they're building a new world of order. And if you're into destruction, and many people are around the world, we see that with all of these things going on now, that they believe that if you kill enough people, or if you conquer a people and you can rule over them, that's success. And we're about conquering the hearts of human beings who were created by God. and they were created to build something beautiful on this planet. We work closely with ecologists, for instance.
Yes.
If we might march in a one of these green parades,
Earth Day parade.
Earth Day parades,
Yeah.
and so forth.
Yes.
Yeah, we would be very interested. That the Baha'is are closely aligned with groups such as Faith in Place,
Right.
which is labeled as Stronger Congregations for a Sustainable World. And we've been very much involved in that. We have programs presented at the Baha'i Center on those subjects, and we encourage literacy, universal education. These are things that are going to make the world better. The equality of men and women, for instance, we take that for granted in this country, and yet, if you talk to some people, especially women, we're not there yet.
Right.
Now, some men will argue with that, say, well, maybe.
Well, compared to a lot of other countries.
Right.
We ain't doing too bad.
Yes, we're not doing
Compared
too
to some
bad.
other countries, but
Compared-
yes, we have a long
right.
way to go.
The Baha'i Faith teaches that we should have a second language that everyone can understand, a universal auxiliary language. We don't have that yet. Right now, English is pretty widespread, but it's not necessarily the universal language. But in the future, we will have, in addition to our own language, we will have a second language that everyone can communicate with, because it's so essential in bringing the world together and actually saving the planet, because we have to talk to each other and understand each other.
Well, there was at least an attempt with, what was that called?
Esperanto?
Esperanto.
Yes,
Back in last century.
yes.
That has not totally faded away. I have a friend who speaks it, a young man. But it was a start anyway.
Yes, it was. I knew many Baha'is when I was first in the faith that were studying Esperanto. Not so much now; it's lost its popularity. But the daughter of the man who invented Esperanto was a Baha'i.
Yes.
It's Lydia Zamenhof, and I believe, I'm not sure, she may have visited here at one
Really?
time. One of our principles, too, is a spiritual solution to the economic problem. And that's such a big subject, I wouldn't even attempt to explain it, except that I will say that we're seeing more and more books coming out about ethics in business.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
That's the corruption is the other end of the spectrum.
Right.
And we have to begin teaching children from early age these spiritual principles, to be truthful, to be honest, to be trustworthy, to be fair. Baha'u'llah says, the best beloved in my sight is justice. Turn not away therefrom. And this is what it's about, justice. And we see injustice everywhere we turn. And if you want to know more about injustice, go to the black community. They will tell you all about it, because they live it every day.
Well, and I suspicion there are a lot of other people besides the blacks who also experience that, though they suffer probably the most widely.
Well, in this country, certainly.
Yes. And anytime you have this 1% up there, and things are getting wider and wider apart, so that we have the extremely elite wealthy and the spectrum on the other end, where people don't have enough to actually put on their tables. This widening and widening is definitely an injustice all around things. And as you said, ethically, what we are taught is, if you do have money, there's nothing wrong with having money, so long as it is not to the extreme And if you are not leaving people destitute, uh, it is not right for some to have excessive wealth and others to have nothing. Everybody should have adequate, and nobody having an excess.
Yeah, I think it was Baha'u'llah, and my father likes to quote the scriptural quotation that go to the rich and tell them of the midnight sufferings of the poor.
Yes,
That was
That's right.
Yeah.
yes, that's a beautiful verse, isn't it?
And actually, we live in a country where we have had these laws passed that has changed things and makes food available. I am, kind of shocked when I think about how much people have to depend on food banks
Yes.
to live. In this country, the richest country in the world, how can that be? How can that happen? And it may be that I know there's always been poor people. There have always been rich people. It's that middle class that is shrinking. And that wasn't the same when I was growing up. But this country has been through so many phases, we got through the Civil War, we got through the First World War, we got through the Great Depression, the Second World War, and we emerged victorious after that point. That everything was wonderful in 1950,
In the
something like that.
1950s,
But it
yes.
wasn't wonderful. There were all of these social problems that existed.
Yeah, they're just
And,
invisible.
When I think about the 60s, that was such an important revolution, social revolution.
Yeah.
And somehow, I really think it was because I became a Baha'i during that time. I was hardly aware of it because I was so involved in trying to make things better for my family
Sure.
and for my neighborhood and for learning. I wanted to learn as much as I could and still do. You never stop learning. You never stop really getting educated.
Not if you intend to keep
And as
living.
a Baha'i, you have huge amount of published literature, and it's very unique. If you read other things and then read the Baha'i, say the sacred writings, it's quite different it takes a little bit of adjustment. I used to say, why doesn't Baha'u'llah just talk in plain English? Well, first of all, he was a Persian.
Now, there's a good reason.
He was in Persian. His writings are in Persian and in Arabic. And they have to be translated, and they have to be translated by people who are erudite scholars. They have to have it accurate. And yet we have this wonderful ocean of literature now
Yes, we
in
do.
every language in the whole world. The Baha'i faith is growing very, very rapidly around the world. And the way that it's growing is not by going to these places and converting people in that sense. The Baha'is go to these places now and they set up schools. They help set up, teach people how to
Like
set up
irrigation.
small businesses.
Oh, yeah, and small businesses, yeah.
And we have social and economic development projects all over the world. So anyway, it's been a glorious journey for me. I can't imagine what my life would have been like without the Baha'i faith. I can't imagine the direction it might have taken. What my children would be like today.
And they are all three Baha'is.
They are all three Baha'is, yes.
And you are still active. You are still an active Baha'i.
Yes, I'll be 80 years old next week. Next April.
Next
Next week, I'm getting ahead of myself.
I was going to say, I'm going to hit 80 before you do.
That's right, we have this. And now it's on the airways.
You're right. Everybody knows. Well, we are so glad to have had you here today, Dottie.
Thank you.
Just you
My
presented
pleasure.
so much wonderful information and I know there's a lot more things we could ask you. We could ask you more things about the World Center. You worked there and you've pilgrimaged there, and you've worked up at National Center in Evanston. You have just had a wonderful Baha'i life.
I have. I treasure my Baha'i family, and which has taught me to love the world. And anyway, I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you. We are so glad that you came.
Thank you.
This is the river of everlasting life that hath flowed from the wellspring of the pen of the merciful. Well is it with them that drink. This is the river of everlasting life that hath flowed from the wellspring of the pen of the merciful. Well is it with them that drink. O my servant, abandon not for that which perisheth, an everlasting dominion, and cast not away celestial sovereignty for a worldly desire. This is the river of everlasting life that hath flowed from the wellspring of the pen of the merciful. Well is it with them that drink. This is the river of everlasting life that hath flowed from the wellspring of the pen of the merciful. Well is it with them that drink. O my servant, abandon not for that which perisheth, an everlasting dominion, and cast not away celestial sovereignty for a worldly desire. This is the river of everlasting life that hath flowed from the wellspring of the pen of the merciful. Well is it with them that drink. This is the river of everlasting life that hath flowed from the wellspring of the pen of the merciful. Well is it with them that drink.
O my God, unite the hearts of thy servants, and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord. Baha'u'llah.
Cleave ye to the hem of the raiment of virtue. Keep fast hold of the cord of piety and trustworthiness. Have regard to the good of the world, and not to your own selfish desires. O peoples of the world, ye are the shepherds of the world. Keep ye your flocks unbesmirched by the mire of evil passion and desire, and adorn each one with the ornament of the fear of God. This is the firm command that hath issued forth in this day from the pen of the ever-abiding. I swear by the righteousness of God, the sword of upright conduct and goodly character is sharper than blades of steel. Baha'u'llah.
children of dust, tell the rich of the midnight sighing of the poor, lest heedlessness lead them into the path of destruction, and deprive them of the tree of wealth. To give and to be generous are attributes of mine. Well is it with him that adorneth himself with my virtues. Baha'u'llah.
Lord of the mountain, calling me home, feathers of angels rippling a song in the juniper maple, sweet columbine. Lord of the mountain, wildflowers and wheat fields shining a light, and every leaf pointing to the divine. Ask for an answer, and each atom sighs, Lord of the mountain. Roses are dripping all along the boughs, mulberry petals, raspberry clouds, flowers of April settling around, Lord of the mountain. We are children of light, we are longing for flight, we are made of stars, we will last forevermore. No less the daisies, no less the grass, no more the orchid, porcelain heart. It's only the shadows which keep light apart, Lord of the mountain. Lord of the mountain, calling me home. My eyes are like planets circled in sky. Inside me a universe longing to find, Lord of the mountain.
The musicians on today's program were Kiyu Hagagi, playing the santur in the opening segment. The Voices of Baha, directed by Tom Price. This is the Day and O Son of Spirit by Grant Hinden Miller. O Baha'u'llah, the Baha'i Choir led by Van Gilmer, and Thy Name is My Healing by Barb Qualls. If you would like to learn more about the Baha'i community in the Champaign-Urbana area, or any of the activities we have mentioned today, you can visit our website at www.cu-bahai.org. If you would like to learn more about the Baha'i Faith, you may go to www.bahai.us. If you would like to contact the local Baha'i community in Champaign-Urbana, please visit our website at www.cu-bahai.org and click Contact. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope you'll join us again next month. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this week's Weekend Heartbeat on WEFT Champaign 90.1 FM, Community Radio, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, streaming live at www.weft.org.